Now to a 2 News investigation. The hard choices you face if your parents are among the millions with Alzheimer's disease.
Their dementia can open the door to criminals. Tonight, Pam Elliott shows you what can happen when your mom or dad hires a man that she found right there in the yellow pages.
Human worth is not based on possessions.
At 91, Mary Day appears healthy. In reality, she is a victim of her own mind. Alzheimer's has taken its toll.
Because we bear God's image, we can feel positive about ourselves.
She sits in a Dayton assisted living center reading her Bible, about 1,000 miles from the only home she's ever really known.
And you must remember, I'm an old lady from way down south.
Ah, Southern Belle. Day taught school in Shreveport, Louisiana. She and her husband James raised 3 children. When James died, Mary planned to stay in Caddo Parish. But in 2007, her daughter, Susan Sussman, who lives in Miamisburg, got a call that changed everything.
The bank had called us and told us that our mother had an overdraft. Also, our sister stated that the man told her that he was going to marry her. And we headed down to Shreveport.
The overdraft led to the discovery of a series of questionable checks.
It looks like 2 or 3 different kinds of signatures. And when we finished, we had about anywhere from $54,000 to $56,000 out of the checking account.
Most checks went to a man named M.C. Scott. Susan found out her mom had hired Scott to clean up her yard. She paid him $9,000, and it didn't stop there. And how did Mary Day find M.C. Scott? Well, it appears through this ad for Dixie Tree Service, which offered a senior citizen discount.
It was awful because the law enforcement would not do anything.
Frustrated, Susan did some of her own digging, and she found out that M.C. Scott was also Melvin Clay Scott, and he had a criminal record. We called the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and indeed, he had served time for arson, conspiracy, and possession of a destructive device in Louisiana. Now, 15 years after his release, he is expected back in a federal courtroom because Susan Sussman never gave up. Sussman took stacks of information to Caddo Parish authorities and Louisiana's Attorney General. Then, with the help of a U.S. Senator, her findings reached the FBI. In July, a federal grand jury in Shreveport indicted Scott on 5 counts of mail fraud and 1 count of bank fraud. He is due in court December 5th.
He managed to do away with everything that my mother had.
So how do prosecutors say Scott defrauded Mary Day? According to the indictment, Scott obtained a power of attorney in 2007 and was able to access her checks and annuities. Then he married her in October of 2007.
I haven't seen one picture of my mother standing by anyone being married, but evidently it took place.
Because Mary tied the knot, Sussman went to extraordinary measures to have the marriage annulled. That took 3 years. Then there was the matter of her mother's mental health. In October of 2007, Sussman filed an interdiction petition. The court finally granted it in 2009, giving Susan the authority to make decisions for her mother.
No one wants to interdict their parents because that means you do not have mental capacity to do anything. Everything is taken away from you. And I didn't want to have to do that to my mother. But that was the only way that I could get her out of this situation.
Susan believes she saved her mother's life. She showed me Mary's ID cards from Louisiana and Ohio to prove just how thin she'd become there. Sussman believes Melvin Scott defrauded her mom of $1 million and cost Susan a great deal as well, emotionally and financially.
My life savings. But how can you put a price on your mother?
Susan says her mother doesn't recognize pictures of Melvin Clay Scott. But the day I met Mary, the man she doesn't remember, the man accused of ripping her off, finally came to mind.
Melvin Clay Scott,
Really? And who is Melvin Clay Scott?
a man.
Well, I got that part. What else can you tell me about him?
I thought that he was a good man, but I found out differently later.
And unfortunately, due to the Alzheimer's, Susan cannot rely on her mother to help with the case against Melvin Scott. Mary Day's memory is just not consistent. Now, Susan told me when she started noticing her mother's dementia years ago, she tried to bring her here to Ohio before Melvin Scott even entered the picture. But her mother refused to leave her home. And Louisiana's Elderly Protective Services granted her the right to stay put.
Oh, what a nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
I
it's
went
just
on
such
for
a sad
7 years.
story.
7 years.
Oh gosh, that is so sad. So what about Melvin Scott? Where is he today?
Well, we understand, Michelle, from his attorney, who is not, she's not offering any more comment, then he is at home awaiting trial. He's been ill. He's 88 years old himself. But again, they're not commenting at least till the trial and maybe not after that.
What about if you're the son or the daughter and you're in Susan's position? What do you do then?
Mark, it is so complicated and frustrating. In fact, that is why we've called in an expert from the Alzheimer's Association to join us in the next half hour to talk about coming up with a protection